Welcome to our new season, Trade Secrets.
We're handing the microphone to the people who actually build, wire, plumb and finish our homes.
And we're asking them, what are the top 5 things that every home renovator should know?
The mistakes to avoid, the money worth spending, and tips to make every renovation run a little more smoothly.
Welcome back to the podcast. Hi, Kate.
Hi, Jen.
We are continuing with our Trade Secrets, where we bring you all the best tips from the trades and the professionals in the construction industry who can tell you secrets and tips that will get the best result for your build. So for this one, we have spoken to painters and paint companies in the past, and for this episode, we went right to the source. And we spoke to Karena Hyland, who is a research and development manager at Fleetwood Paints, which is an Irish paint company. So knee deep in like paint manufacturing, what actually works for the Irish climate, what to do to get the best results, etc. So
yeah,
shall we
nice and technical, the way I like
Very
it.
technical. We do love, we like to nerd out on things in this podcast, you and I in particular.
Yeah, and also like I feel like I can appreciate painting from every single side. I've painted the whole house myself from scratch. I have paid for cheap painters in the interim before renovating, and I have had the more expensive painters this time around to finish the house. So I feel like I can appreciate all sides here. So it'll be interesting to go through these answers. So same 5 questions we always ask.
We've both tried lots of different tools as well. We've done paintbrushes, we've done spray painting, and I've recently done a touch-up effort, which we can talk about. But yeah, there's a lot to cover here. It's
not to be underestimated, painting, is it? Like anyone can slap a paint on a wall, but like to get a good finish is harder than you think. And like we'll probably get into it, but like we mentioned this before in an old technical paint episode, like it's 70-80% prep and 20% the actual rolling the paint on the wall. So anyway, let's see what Karena says. The first question is, you need to plan this earlier than you think. So if you want the best result possible from painting your room and surface prep must be given consideration well in advance of the painting day. And this can often take longer than expected and cause painting time to be limited and hence rushed, compromising the final finish. So areas for painting should be cleared as much as possible and any wall imperfections filled and allowed to cure for recommended period of time before painting commences. So yeah, exactly like we were talking to there.
I think what happens to people is they go, we'll paint the room. Let's do it. We'll do it this weekend. And then they get all the stuff together, and then Saturday afternoon rolls around and there's plans for pizza that evening, and it's just not enough time.
No, it's
not. The prep time just is not factored in.
Yeah, and like just the different stages of painting, you know, with the filling, that leaving that plaster or filler or whatever, or caulk and whatever to dry, possibly sanding again, you know, and the dust sanding creates as well needs to be factored in here, because if you've, you know, finished floor finishes or any kind of fabrics already there and delivered, you know, so you really need to coordinate, I think, your painting and decorating stage with so many other things. And I've seen houses where they've painted rooms and then a floor sander person came in after and the paint finish was wrecked. They had to repaint rooms. So like, I think coordinating and stacking up the time needed for all this is really important. And I think if you can at all have the place empty for painters, or at least have it empty room by room. Yeah. But even that, like, it's so hard because a lot of painters now, the initial coat, they might want to spray it. And if you can spray the first coat, I mean, with the best will in the world and the amount of mask and whatever, that mist paint goes everywhere. Like, you know, it's so hard. It goes over your
ceilings. It definitely goes all over your floors. Like there are, mist particles everywhere. There's just no getting around it. One thing there, Karena said, that's really important if you're doing it yourself, especially if you have an older house, is any wall imperfections filled and allowed to cure for the recommended period of time. There's so many reasons why this is important. One is that if you're doing it yourself, you've probably bought like a pre-mixed maybe poly filler or something like that, which is absolutely fine for wall imperfections, but it does tend to shrink a bit more than the kind of powder mixed, you know, professional grade wall filler. So not only do you want to put it on and let it cure, but you need to probably sand it down to smooth it out. And then you need to make sure that it hasn't shrunk below what you need? Like, is it actually filled the little hole? And it probably will for small little gaps and things like that. But it is so important to allow the time for that. And if you spend the time on that, then your job will be immeasurably better. It's so worth it.
And you're finished. Like, just the way it will look, the walls will just look so much better. And you know what? In basic dark light, you'll get away with the crappy paint finish. But if you have, you know, particular angles of light coming into a room where it's hitting walls, you will see every bad stroke on that wall. You'll see every bit of lint that's stuck from a new roller that you haven't primed. You know, like, you will see a bad paint finish. And I know I've probably said this a million times, I do not believe in cheap painters. I believe in cheap paint jobs. And I think, like, paint is about time and materials. And, like, I
agree.
I think you get what you pay for when you get a painter if you're paying for a professional.
I couldn't agree more. And if you're DIYing it, we're not saying you shouldn't, we're just saying never underestimate the prep. It's so important. So important. Anyway.
Yeah. I've seen beautiful houses ruined with a bad paint job at the end. As in, like, oh, my builder has a painter that will do it for half the price. I got quoted elsewhere, and I was like, build it. Okay, we'll see what that turns out like.
Yeah, I'm so with you.
Yeah. Okay, question
Number
2. Spend more money on rooms and areas that are used most in the household. They get the most wear and tear and foot traffic, be it human or family pets. There are many highly durable paints available in various finishes that don't scuff easily. And look as fresh as the day they were painted. Ones like multi-surface, a lot of brands are doing that now, can be used from ceiling to skirting in a room. So one paint can potentially do the entire room instead of a separate wall paint and wood paint. So I love the idea of these multi-surface ones now, because otherwise you're left with 5 different tins of, like, you know, an eggshell finish or a matte or a washable matte, and, you know, they might all be the same color. But this multi-surface could be, you know, a real game changer, I think.
Yeah, and it's a more streamlined look because it's so right. Some people, I think the 2 mistakes people can make is either just go for, you know, a similar finish or the same finish all over, which means that you're not getting we think of paint as bringing color into a room. And while that's true, the actually arguably more important job of paint is as a coating, and even a performance coating for outdoor paint or for those high traffic areas, where it covers the surface and protects the surface and makes the surface, you know, last longer and do things that are helpful for you in your daily life, such as be easy to wipe off or not dent easily or not get scuffed by your bike that I drag in and out of my hallway every day and, you know, leave scuff marks. So considering the finish and what performance you need that finish to achieve, or function you need that finish to achieve, is important. And Karina's right. The multi-surface is a game changer because you get that lovely uniform look. And you're right about the cans of paint, because oh my God, I would say overbuying paint is an issue
so
that
many
I have
still in my boiler house.
recently.
So many still in my boiler house. I actually just bought some random huge canvases off Amazon last week, so I was like, I'm going to use up all my leftover paint and try and paint some huge canvases myself.
Love that.
But
you can do anything you turn your hand to, so I am very keen to see how these turn out. You'll probably be a famous artist by this time next year.
I really believe in paying for good paint, though. And we spoke about this before. You can colour match, yes, you can, but you really have to colour match in batches, and you have to really sense check it against the sample you had, because they can slightly vary. I think good quality paint has more pigment in it, full stop.
Yeah.
So while painters will say their paint X might be their favourite, interior designers might say Y, because Y is more pigmented and it's hitting exactly what their mood board and their style that they've laid out for the client looks like. The painter wants to know what's easy to paint with, and might be wipeable or whatever, but the colour vibrancy mightn't be there. That matte, super matte finish mightn't be there. So, like, you have to kind of listen to both sides here, because I think what the painter wants isn't always necessarily what the homeowner / interior designer or whatever wants in the end as well. So I always think it's worth paying for the paint brand you want in a specific colour. That doesn't mean you always have to go for the expensive brand, but a good paint, I don't think you'll regret. An example of that is my mom painted her apartment maybe, 18 months ago. And then she had to fill one part of a wall where there was some repairs, got the same paint again. And the paint in that 18 months had discoloured so drastically that she had to paint the whole wall.
It does really discolour, doesn't it? It's crazy how much it discolours. But like, because even if you do get the really good paint, that can still discolor. That's worth noting. Even your flooring, like everything that especially is in direct sunlight, especially this summer, is going to discolor to a certain amount. And then of course you're going to have grease and stains in certain high traffic areas as well. So it is hard to color match sometimes, but oh my God, the stuff, like the cheap stuff can really just like change color, transform color.
Really can.
Not as much as the old stuff, the old oil-based stuff that used to really, it just turned yellow. Like it was, and that's not really the case anymore, but yeah.
Yeah. I did a colour match in Farrow & Ball shaded white in my kitchen because they didn't, at the time, my previous renovation, have this kind of highly washable mat.
Yeah.
So I bought a colour mat, but the rest of my house was real Farrow & Ball in the same shade. Totally different.
Really?
Yeah.
The other thing, like, it's going to be different on different surfaces too. And a lot of people are going to be getting kitchens, and getting the original brand paint is not going to be an option because your kitchen company will just have their own
I'm talking
paint
about the kitchen walls.
machine.
I'm not even talking about my
different
cabinets.
Okay, sorry. Go on.
I'm just talking about the walls, where like a transition from the hallway to the kitchen. I used a more wipeable paint or washable paint just for, you know, grease splat, whatever. I just thought steamy kitchens would need a bit more, but it just looked very different, like night and day. Even if the colour was slightly off, there was definitely more green in the colour matched one than the Farrow & Ball one, but even the texture of the paint in my eyes didn't look as nice. It didn't look as velvety and soft and matte or something as the original. So like, look, I know paint is expensive as well when you're painting a whole house, but just go with the brand's colour rather than colour matching another brand, in my opinion.
Yeah. And I think as well, like, your painter might say, we prefer this colour because it's easier to apply or whatever, right? Tough, to be honest, because the actual painting is lasting a few days. I don't care if your life is slightly easier for a few days. I want this outcome to last on my walls for the next like 5 to 10 years, ideally. So I don't really care about making your life easier for 2 days. I do care if they really recommend, if a professional strongly recommends that the lasting output is better and different for whatever reason. Fine, I'll listen to you then. But if it's slightly easier or harder to put on, tough, don't care. Good luck. Give me more money. That's
So don't waste money on them. What's the opposite? Buying excess product for the job than what is required. Calculate how much paint is needed for the job, but buy accordingly. And with leftover paint, the chances are it will sit in a shed.
Yeah.
And eventually we dumped or painted on a canvas when the colour is changed next time round. So yeah, look, we talked about this in the multi-surface. It's hard to get it bang on right. It is really hard. But I'd say, like, rather than buying different colours, I even think if you're doing a mist coat, do the mist coat in the colour you're doing the top coat. So you're kind of like, well, as long as it's like a lightish colour or whatever. I did the mist coat in like whatever the base coat was anyway.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do that now. Maybe mix it with a bit of water or something and just have that mist and let it dry off as the base. Another thing people might not know is that paint goes off. So having, like, there is benefit to knowing the exact paint color, finish type, and even batch number, if possible, that is on your walls. Because if you do need to do a repair job or a touch-up job, that can be really, really helpful to know. And maybe you do want the exact same next time around. So I would log that somewhere. But it goes off. So if it's just sitting unopened or opened and maybe, you know, the lid put back on or taped over or whatever for years, it will go off ultimately, and that's not helpful to you. So, you know, there's no point in wasting storage space when what you actually need is the information so that you can get the same or as close to paint again, if possible.
You know, what's interesting is Karena here did not say waste money on like tools or materials. It was just excess, because people will buy cheap paint tools and throw them out, which I'm strongly against, because first of all, I think it's wasteful. But second of all, you just don't get the good finish, I don't think, with shitty paintbrushes and rollers. I think it's worth spending a bit more. So that's definitely
you had a paintbrush you recommended before, I think, on your Instagram. Maybe it was our last episode.
Wooster is the brand of paintbrushes I normally use. It's kind of like a silver tip version, which is the fine kind of tips, makes them very super flexible and you don't get brush strokes. So I love the Wooster ones. Purdy is another brand that a lot of professionals use. I think we have Purdy rollers and extension poles and all that from the first time we painted our house. But they're good and they give a good finish. I just think the cheaper ones, you end up getting a load of kind of like lint from the rollers or whatever you call it on your wall. You know, the foam kind of comes off and sticks sometimes in the paint. And then when you're using wood paint brushes or whatever, or cut-ins, you know, you see the hairline strokes if it's a crappy brush, I think, a lot of the time.
Yeah, 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 I agree. So I think sometimes people can think, we'll just go paint it ourselves, we'll save the money on the painters, don't understand why it's so expensive. And then if you want to get the same level of finish, you probably will end up spending, you know, not as much necessarily, but unless you're doing it over and over again, do you really want to be storing those tools?
It's a
So I'm
lot.
just continuing to
I
advocate here
literally,
for a good painter.
I vowed never to do it again after my first time when we did the whole house.
Really
Now
hard.
we did 3 meter high ceilings every single wall in the whole house. So I'd say there was probably close to 300 or 400 square meters of walls and ceilings in the whole house. And that was 3 coats on everything, mist coat and 2 coats color. Like, it almost killed us. Like, do not underestimate that if you're doing a whole house. I would at least pay for a good painter to come in and do the mist coat spray in one base kind of color. And then maybe you might decide to tackle room by rooms that are still empty kind of down the line. But when you're dealing with like high ceilings and, you know, hallway landings that are very tall, like, you need scaffolding, you need proper ladders, you need all that. Like, it's hard. It's a hard slog. I wouldn't do it again with kids. We were kind of young.
And if you're standing you're standing looking at a wall and you've got like a roller or a paintbrush, whatever, and you're moving your hand up and down, you're like, this is not that difficult. Anything outside of like waist height and shoulder height is either you bending over and trying to like get the same kind of, you know, pattern of movement so that you don't interrupt the finish, or reaching up above shoulder height, which gets heavy fast and sore fast on your shoulders, on your neck. So again, we wouldn't say no. Do it if you think you can, but don't underestimate the task. And it is very physical. Yeah, it really is.
Okay, so do this to get the best finish. Masking tape around the windows to keep the lines straight on areas that you don't want painted, to keep them free from paint. It takes time and patience, but it's really worthwhile. And getting the right masking tape for the job as well, you know, low tack ones, whatever, so they don't peel off old paint finishes is important as well. But it is worth prep. I am the worst for this, I will say. I just want to get the paint on the wall a lot of the time. My husband will mask for like a day before we touch anything. But it is worth it, the masking off and covering things. And like we said earlier, if you're working around furniture and new floors and all that jazz, like trying to get stuff properly prepped is a lot of work.
Yeah, and taking the tape off on time is important as well. So you put it, like, it is really, I agree, especially if you're a first timer. Like, I think there's lots of professional painters out there who maybe don't mask things off because they, you know, really go for that straight line and they're super experienced and pro at it. But if it's your first time painting a house, or your second or third or whatever, then I do think having the masking tape on is necessary, because you will get it on your windows or your whatever, your floors. But know that you take it off while the paint is still wet is really important as well, because otherwise you can rip off the paint.
You can pull whole chips off as well.
Yeah.
Okay, the biggest mistake that homeowners make is there is a reason for so many different types of paints on the market, and homeowners should give this lots of consideration. Paint should be chosen not just for colour, but for its desired longevity. If you plan to paint your kitchen just once every few years, a highly durable, washable paint that withstands stains should be used. Fleetwood have an easy clean version of this. Like a washable matte, like we mentioned earlier. There's lots of different versions and brands. Something like that is ideal for kitchen areas. It will be more cost initially than the standard paint, but will last the test of time. So it's kind of back to what we said earlier, you know, not skimping out on paint and finishes and the quality of the paint, I think is important here.
It's funny, I'm going off track here, but back in my corporate days when I worked in extension consulting, I had a client that was not Fleetwood, but a big global paint company that did own a lot of decorative home brands, but also did paint and coatings for things like submarines and wind turbines and stuff like that. So I really got very nerdy deep into what level of performance those coatings can achieve. And it's really important. It's really impressive. And I think okay, not as applicable to maybe your kitchen because that doesn't need to withstand, however many G forces of pressure or submarine,
Yeah.
um, once undersea. But still, again, we've said it already, but just remember that different paints do different things and they can make your
Yeah.
life easier and contribute to the longevity of your paint.
And
And it's really worth.
remember paints get touch dry in a couple of hours. That does not mean they're cured, you know.
Yeah.
It, paints can take a couple of weeks to properly cure and harden, So
Yeah,
like,
especially in certain times of year.
yeah, especially in different temperatures, everything exactly. They
Yeah.
say outside you shouldn't paint below 8 degrees, is it?
Yeah,
Because
I
the
think
paint
so.
just
Yeah.
won't cure. So
Yeah.
like, I think you really have to be careful you're not dinging freshly painted walls or cabinets or whatever because the
Hmm.
paint is still soft for a few weeks. So I
Yeah.
remember Savvy telling me that about my kitchen. And he was like, these have only been sprayed, so be gentle with them for the next couple of weeks. Don't be banging stuff off them or don't be letting, the kids run into them with scooters or whatever because it will
Yeah.
ding and chip a lot easier in those first few weeks before it's cured.
Yeah.
So it's just something to keep in mind.
And like now, if you're listening this week, this is the time to get your house painted on the outside if you like get your painter in ASAP because just as you said, there is a degree, I think it's 8 degrees, but you can look that up yourself, listener. But there is a temperature under which paint just doesn't cure properly. So if you get your house painted in the dead of winter, it could just not cure properly until potentially
Yeah.
that summer. After, by which point God knows how much damage has been done to the outside of your house.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
I just got the
something
front of
to.
mine done.
Oh,
A
did you?
year in the
When?
house. Yeah. Just
Uh,
the apex of the house, like that we couldn't reach. We got painted,
oh yeah,
especially,
yeah.
and the overhang over our hall doors. So all that old wood out there kind of restored and done. It was just not on the list when we were kind of moving in last year. There was just too much other stuff going on, but it's done now.
So
It
this
was the
maybe this is
perfect
a good
time.
takeaway actually though for you listener because we're talking about it being worth investing in good quality
Mm,
paints.
yes.
It being worth investing in a good painter who will do a good job, and it being worth investing in good quality tools if you are painting yourself.
Yeah.
And that all sounds very expensive, but that does contribute to longevity. So over time, the cost should even out. Because if you get a cheap job
Mm,
done, you're going to have to get it done again anyway at some stage. All that to say, though, you don't necessarily have to do that immediately. Like if you're moving into your house and budget is a factor and you've run out of money or whatever, maybe there are some rooms that, as you said, get the painter to do just a base coat or a mist coat on now and then come
yeah.
back to it in a year or two. And yeah, you're going to have to move your furniture out and you're going to have to cover everything off and that's going to be annoying. But, it can be a spend that you wait for later and especially the outside of your house as well. Like you don't necessarily have to do that immediately.
Yeah.
Um,
But
yeah.
the mistake, just going back to that mistake that like there's so many different paints on the market and you should pay for kind of the finish you need. I think you should also pay for the service you need. So going back to the whole like idea
Yeah.
of there's no cheap paint or only cheap paint jobs. You cannot compare just two random paint quotes for painting my house. Like, what does that paint quote include? It should be a detailed quote, like when you're getting your tender
Yeah.
back. You know what I mean? What is included? It should almost be like line items of a bill of quantities, like we spoke about, getting prices back when you go
Yeah.
to tender. So, like, good painters will have the restoration priced in, sanding the walls, pre-sand, like you might fill the walls. Other painters might literally be coming in and just slapping paint on things. And that's
And a
a
paint and
job
a paintbrush,
too.
nothing else. Yeah.
Look, and that's a job too. But like if you actually factor in the cost of all that masking, all that taping off, all that prep work, then you have to compare the same when you're comparing a different price. So
Yeah.
when people say, oh, well, this painter said 14 grand for my whole house, this guy's doing it for 7. What's he doing for 7? That's what I want
Yeah.
to know,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
get that
And
detail.
the back to what we always say as well about choosing your contractor, your team, whoever else, is communication. So what happens if during that paint job something goes wrong? So if you're paying, the 7 grand or the cheap whatever, what if they get paint splatters on your windows or your floor, or they end up damaging something, or it's just not done properly? Then do you have recourse? Will they come back and fix that, or are they gone? And you end up ultimately then paying more in the long run to get it redone, to get something clean, to get something fixed, whatever it might be.
Yeah, exactly. That's my 2 cents.
paint.
And unless you have a very strong marriage, I would say don't paint your house with your husband.
You're still together, so
it'll definitely test
you. You didn't do this house, so that probably says something.
No, it definitely test you.
All right, that was Karena Hyland, Research and Development Manager at Fleetwood. Thank you for those very insightful answers, and we'll be back next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
If you enjoyed that episode, likes, shares and subscribes really help us out. So if you can, please do. Thank you.